¿Quién es Joaquin Murrieta? Who is Joaquin Murrieta? It depends on who you ask and when you ask. To people in the gold rush era, he's a bandit, a murderer, and legally speaking, he's a convict. To Mexicans and Mexican Americans today or in the 1850s, he could be a hero, someone who fought back against injustices, someone who decided to seek justice in the unjust and racist California gold rush era. It's important to understand the time frame Joaquin is living in. This is a time just after the United States invaded Mexico and took 55% of Mexico's territory at gunpoint, including all or parts of California, Nevada, Arizona, Utah, New Mexico, Wyoming, Colorado, Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas. U.S. consideration to take more land was discussed, but ultimately, U.S. racism saved Mexico. Approximately 110,000 Mexican citizens living in northern Mexico would now be in Mexico one day and in the U.S. the next day. For federal lawmakers, that was enough, and the new borders were set. Now that the entire Southwest went from sovereign Mexican territory to the United States, many people of color suffered under the new regime. Joaquin Murrieta is living in a time of the California gold rush, where nearly 240,000 people inundated California in only a few years. As California went from sovereign Mexican to the United States, the first piece of legislation passed by California was racist. California was a racist state and behaved accordingly. The gold rush era foreign miners tax specifically targeted Mexicans, and with a $20 a month new fee, California legislators managed to rid 10,000 Mexican miners from the goldfield of California, who were mostly superior miners to East Coast store clerks, businessmen, and other immigrants who had zero mining experience. This is an era of gold rush violence and Wild West mob justice. What's presenting here is barely a snapshot of the violence by drunk, poor, and mostly male miners who failed to strike it rich, and they blamed others for their failures. Some examples included the whipping of a young Hispanic miner on unsubstantiated charges. 16 Chileans were executed after a pseudo trial. The accused did not understand the charges without an interpreter. A boy's ears were chopped off for stealing. This is an era of hyperviolence and mob justice. The murder rate was unprecedented. The annual, the annual murder rate was 50 times the rate of 1999 in Sonora, California. Small cities like Los Angeles had the highest murder rate in the Union, about one a day, and remained the highest murder rate through the 2000s. Racism and mob violence against people of color was normalized. And from 1848 to the 1920s, mobs murdered thousands of Mexicans for a variety of reasons. Racism, the Wild West, and mob justice explains some of their behavior. The lynching was particularly one important historical aspect. The violence was also extended to women of color. In 1851, an angry mom of 2,000 hanged a pregnant Juanita, more commonly known as Josefa. Alone in her cabin, a drunk miner broke in and attempted to rape her. She stabbed him, and the mob killed her. These are the times Joaquin Murrieta is living in, and these will influence his cultural identity and response. This is an era where Native Americans were enslaved in the great free state of California. The Act for the Government and Protection of Indians of 1850 legalized the enslavement of Native Americans in California. The law allowed white people to turn in alleged non working Native Americans where they can be rented at public auctions. Families were separated during the state sponsored slavery, and it was the first step in California's native genocide that would kill over 100,000 California natives, eradicating some nations off the face of the earth. California had a slavery and genocide, and these are the times that Joaquin Murrieta is living in. And not just slavery, but California hunting, Indian hunting. In the 1850s, over 100,000 California natives were killed, many by white settlers, and many of them sponsored and paid for by the government. Native extermination was encouraged. As a matter of fact, California put its money where its mouth was and allocated over $1 million to kill Native Americans, to reimburse these killers for expenses incurred. And with all that comes Joaquin Murrieta, who symbolizes the rage, the Chicano rage of many white violence in the gold rush era. As you can see, Mexicans were treated very poor, just like most people of color. Now, personally, Murrieta has a part factual and part mythical history where he was forced out of his mining placer, that his brother was killed and his wife was raped. To call him the Mexican Robin Hood, where he stole from the rich and gave to the poor, is part myth and not accurate. But the substance of a angry young person of color fighting back against the system is what's accurate and is what the teaching objective is today. Many Chicanos decided to fight back, and Joaquin Murrieta is just one of those. Again, who is Joaquin Murrieta? He singularly encapsulates the rage of persons of color. This is somebody who fought back, the avenge the death and treatment of his family, of his brothers, of his wife, right? He raided Caucasian towns, especially in northern and central California, uh, appropriated cattle, took money, horses. Perhaps he killed somebody. How come those numbers are so varied at 20 to 50 people? Because they don't know. And most crimes committed by anyone dark enough becomes Joaquin Murrieta. He also killed racists, right? Joaquin Murrieta is part fantasy and part true. The myth of a Joaquin Murrieta grows into an urban legend. No one knows for sure what he looked like. Therefore, all Mexicans could be targeted. Anybody dark enough could fit that profile and be a threat and can be a Joaquin Murrieta. All murders could be attributed to him, and he becomes this mythical folklore. Joaquin Murrieta, with his brothers, sought their own justice, which made them outlaws to the white ruling class. Often, when white mobs administered justice, it was condoned. When Mexicans administered their own justice, they were deemed murderers. In this mythical folklore, Joaquin Murrieta is born out of that California violence gold rush. He becomes emblematic of the enemy, emblematic of California xenophobes who are scared of other people that don't look like them. Although California was partly responsible for a genocide of over 100,000 Native Americans, if one Mexican American started to fight back and perhaps killed people, that was a bigger threat. A reward of $6,000 was placed on his head. Somebody was captured. We don't know who it was. Somebody was captured. Somebody's head was taken off. Somebody's head was placed in alcohol and taken on tour with the hand of another famous bandit at the time. But Joaquin Murrieta is the Chicano in the Gold Rush area who fights back. So much so that even in the 20th century, Hollywood is making movies of this subject. You see on the left the Joaquin Murrieta, done, I believe, by 20th Century Fox. By the way, my chest looks exactly like that. It's also important to understand that Joaquin Murrieta is written about, he's the first novel to feature a Mexican American hero based out of this truth and based out of this folklore and based out of this fantasy as well. But he represents and becomes emblematic of people of color's treatment and some responses against that. Who is Joaquin Murrieta? He is the embodiment of the dangerous Mexican for many Anglos during this era. What does he look like? Nobody knows. It's unclear. So whose head is in that freaking jar? It's unclear. But we should know that a bad person, a boogeyman, was captured and then killed. Right? Joaquin is the Anglo embodiment of the perilous Mexican that can't be trusted. He could harm you or your family or your business. These Mexicans must be stopped. If no one knows, if no one is certain what Joaquin looks like, then who do you arrest? How would you know who to get? Who do you harass? Then all Mexican Americans or anybody dark enough by extension could be and could be treated as Joaquin. Who is Joaquin? Joaquin is you, Joaquin is me, anybody that could be harassed by the system. Right. Again, here's another 20th Century Fox rendition of him in the classic Hollywood tale. They burned his house, raped his wife, ravaged his land. He's the man who couldn't give a damn. 20th Century Fox presents Joaquin Murrieta, a legend written in blood. No matter how you kind of portray this, Joaquin, the myth and the factual evidence of Joaquin Murrieta turns into this notion of the little guy standing up to the big guy, right? The David versus Goliath, right? The oppressor and the oppressed in Gold Rush, California, right? Although he's become anglicized in his movies, right? The story of this injustice system and resistance is still something that's able to teach young audiences, right? And show some myth and historical accuracy as well. So the hero narratives that we know from Batman can find their roots in this Mexican outlaw, Joaquin Murrieta. From Mexican outlaw to Spanish hero to a white superhero. And what do they have in common? They possess no magic powers. Anyone can be like them. Anyone can fight back. Anyone can decide to resist injustices from the 1850s or even today. We all have the power to resist injustice. Joaquin Murrieta is a complicated historical figure, but Joaquin Murrieta speaks for the oppressed, for those living in a racist world of the 1850s, a world once controlled by Native people of color that after the U.S.-Mexican War and the Gold Rush was ruled by white immigrants. Joaquin Murrieta is the voice of the people fighting back. And that myth goes from Mexican outlaw to a Spanish hero of Zorro to Batman. And to put into final context, he is very much the same as Debricio Vasquez. He's another bandit who spent over 10 years of his life in prison. And what was his crime? It was fighting back against oppression. His great quote, "A spirit of revenge took possession of me. I had numerous fights in defense of what I believe to be my rights and those of my countrymen." Right? Again, to somebody he is a bad guy, and to another person he is defending his legal rights to freedom and independence. So was Modesta Avila, who was the first felony conviction in Orange County. She picked a fight, or really the Santa Fe Railroad Company picked a fight with her, and she decided to fight back. Her famous quote, "This land belongs to me," and if the railroad wants to run here, they would have to pay me $10,000. Joaquin Murrieta is the cry against racism. Joaquin Murrieta is the cry against crimes against humanity. Joaquin Murrieta is the cry against the outrages committed against men and women and children, all in the pursuit of individual profit, says the playwright Luis Valadez.